Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me and this webinar. This webinar's been pre-recorded for you to listen in and hopefully get some things from it. Last night I had the live version, and today I decided to do a shorter version, a quicker version for you if you're listening to this in playback. So thanks for joining me, and I hope this is helpful and useful, and I love your feedback, always love feedback. And sit back, relax, get a cup of tea or some water, and I'm going to get into my slides. And I'm your host, Renee McDonald, counsellor, psychotherapist and coach. So here we go. So I'm just going to start my PowerPoint, and then we will get to what we're talking about today. So from the beginning, here we are. This is the free webinar and pre-recorded webinar for you, for your listening pleasure. It's called Inner Wisdom at Work, and I did have a live version last night at 8 p.m. And I love this beautiful picture by Nora Wendell, and expansive. So for me, working with wisdom is about expanding both within and without into the world, how to be more peaceful within yourself, in addition to working from a heart-centered place. And how could we do that? So who am I? I'm your host today for this webinar, and I'm Renee McDonald. And I'm, like I said, I'm a counsellor, psychotherapist, but I thought I'd kind of put out there a few different bits and pieces. I have a number of different qualifications, whether it's I've worked in music and entertainment, I've done a graduate diploma of counselling, I've got a master's in applied social science, I'm a trainer, assessor, breastfeeding educator, your healing voice professional. So I've got all these different skills, and I hope that then helps you to understand you are in the right place. And yeah, just that I come from a solid grounding of work from both within myself and learning and knowledge. And I believe that is what separates us. Finding and acquiring that knowledge for life and quest for life is often that inner learning and inner journey. And I've found along the way, some of my training has really assisted me in becoming, in a way, more inner wise. So, I'm an academic educator, clinical supervisor, counsellor, psychotherapist, writer. I do blogging. I'm a mum of 3 kids. I'm a wife, and I come from a small community area in the south coast of New South Wales. So hi to all those people if you're local listening to this. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate the time that you're spending here, and this isn't wasted. This is your time for you to be listening, hopefully, to some tidbits of information, and also for you to become more inner wise in your own way. So, we obviously won't be able to hear each other now, but have a think in your introduction of yourself whilst you're listening now. Maybe write that down. Write down, who are you in the world? How am I special? What makes me wise? Okay, that might be something to look at. And what is wisdom? So, I wanted to go to the dictionary, but, don't want this to be too heady. It's just about, well, what does it mean to be wise anyway? It's basically having that experience and knowledge. And here, I guess, within this webinar, I wanted to kind of point out how I might be different to some practitioners than others. And I feel within myself, I have this quest for learning, a quest for knowledge, and a quest for just being, and being within myself, listening to the song and sounds of my heart and mind and body and spirit. And often that helps guide the way for me forward with business, or the way I'm working, or my family, or my relationships. So it's also, being wise is based on those, being sensible, being wise thinking, and it's often a body of knowledge and an experience that develops within like a society, whether it's a community, a period of time. And you look back in history, and it's people like Socrates, it's Plato, Aristotle, Shakespeare. There's numerous people who've actually written and consulted, and the wise people often don't have answers. They don't have answers because often they don't know the answers for you. So what I aim to work with, whether it's with clients or with people I'm mentoring, is how can I help you to help yourself? That's what I'm looking at. And so even if you get that from this webinar, that's great. So we're living in that new age, and some of these notes, I was thinking, how am I going to kind of put this in context with, how are we placed in the world? So we're living in that new space of people are searching for truth at the moment. And certainly we're not getting it from politicians. We're often not getting it from the leaders in our communities. So how can we lead some kind of grassroots movement of more truth-seeking, more spiritual and wisdom-seeking? And I'd love to be part of that. And if that's anything to, go by, I'd hope that that's what you might gain from this, is it's important to truth-seek. So within the being on social media at the moment, we have that self-focus. We need ways of connecting to each other again, because we're wired for connection. So what can we do? What can we do to really wholeheartedly connect with each other? And certainly Brené Brown talks a lot about that in her research, and people have better relationships the more they're connecting with others. Okay, so let's think about who's wise. So certainly last night I had the webinar on, and we were talking about people, whether it's Martin Luther King, Maya Angelou, Oprah, Jesus, Buddha, so many others, and I mentioned Gandhi. So whether it's Socrates, Aristotle, Plato that I mentioned before, these are people who question the way of being. And it's not something that could or can be taken lightly, to question our way of being. But in modern life, we're not questioning the people who are ramming things down our throats of which vehicle should we own, how big should our house be, all those kind of things. I mean, do things or stuff make us wise? That's kind of a question, I guess. Who else might be wise in your life? Do you have a family member or a friend that you can go to and you think, wow, I wonder how they came up with that idea or that level of wisdom? And yeah, something to ponder on. And so now with this inner wisdom at work, we're looking at inner wisdom. So sometimes we look to others for wisdom. What if we have it within ourselves? So that's something really important. I'm hoping you'll glean from this talk, is often if we're quiet enough and still enough, we will find our own wisdom, our own creative space, and be able to come up with some answers for ourselves. So that inner wisdom encourages us to acknowledge our faults, failings, limitations, foibles, whatever it is that makes us different, or we see it as problematic or having an issue. Often acknowledging those things, and that is what makes us special or different to the next human next to us. Is that not what we bring then to the earth to allow others more compassion for us? It's something to think about, I guess. And so my help for you today, and hopefully you'll glean from this webinar, is looking to what you're good at will help you become more wise about who you are in the world. So what is it you're good at? What are you passionate about? What do you crave to do? And what can you leave behind? Even if it's the foibles, the failings that you've had, what of those things can you leave behind? How does that help you move ahead? How does it help you move ahead and see your own inner beauty and inner wisdom if you're able to put to the side that which is most painful to you? So here we're looking at Johari's window. Now, often I look at this with clients or people I work with, and in my teaching that I've done, we'll often look at the Johari's window. We're not aware of what we're blind to. Just like a blind spot in the car, we're just not aware of what we don't know about ourselves. We're not aware of our unknown self either. We have these spots that we're lacking awareness. And this is important for wisdom, is what do we not know? What do we need to know about ourselves? What is it that we still need to work on within ourselves? Is that you need counseling or coaching, or is it that you need more connection with family or friends? What is that you're pushing back on? Obviously, everyone has an open self and even a hidden self. So the hidden self is that which you hide from other people, that which you don't want other people to know about, and that's okay. The sacred places of the self are still okay here. And it's really important to acknowledge that there are some things you just don't want to share, and most people don't even share to their closest friend, relative or counsellor, those things which are so close to our heart. So Johari's window is just about literally opening up the window and realising that there might be spots that are still need a little bit of window shining, need a little bit of work, and really just need some unpacking, and that's okay. Okay, so within then that, Freud came up with a concept called the iceberg of consciousness. Now, Freud, by some people's reckoning, was a little bit of a maverick and not necessarily the best research methods going. However, he is still considered the godfather of counselling and psychotherapy, and effectively then coaching has come off the back of a lot of that stuff. And what Freud came up with was the iceberg. And a little bit like the iceberg sank the Titanic, we need to be aware that there's a lot of things we just don't know about ourselves. Just keeping in mind these kind of things where we have these blind parts of self that are either in our unconscious or pre-conscious levels, and we need them to come up to the surface gradually, and that's what counselling works on. We work on the gradual introduction of things that perhaps people might not be aware of within themselves. So that's something to think about too. And even if it's that you don't seek counselling, but just that you're aware that there might be things you're not aware of, or being aware that there's things there that are still impacting on you years later, that's okay. All right, so I wanted to tell you a story now, and there's a story of the shell and the rock. And so in preparing for this, I went down to the beach, and I love the beach and I live by the beach myself. And so I grabbed a shell and I grabbed a rock. And this is kind of like a symbolic representation. So the symbol of the shell and the rock is important for this discussion around wisdom and how we may find our inner wisdom or work within ourselves with someone else on how to gain insight within our being and our relationships. And it's about the story of the shell and the rock. Okay, so this rock I found at the beach. Now, I chose it for a lot of different reasons. Hopefully you can see that there's a crack, very clear crack in the rock. The rest of it's quite perfect. And if you can see, there's a little bit of a shine to it. I really liked it because it was shiny and yet had some grooves on it. I particularly picked it up because of the crack, because I loved the crack. Now, I liken this to you and how you might be within yourself. So what if those things that have hurt us the most are actually what makes us the most beautiful? And for me, that's what makes this rock so unique, is that crack. I picked it up because it was different, because it spoke to me. All the other rocks looked perfect. Well, what happens to perfect rocks? They might just be there. They might just float through life. They haven't been worn or weathered like this rock. It doesn't show a story. So, and often we can't see the beauty of the cracks that have appeared in our lives, whether it's in our heart, in our issues, in our mind. We can't see that beauty for what it is. So just have a think about that as a symbolic representation of you. What are those things that are troubling you the most? You might want to have a little bit of time now. You can journal about it or write about it if you've got a pad there. And thinking about what are the cracks that make you who you are? How can you appreciate them or have gratitude for those experiences which actually make you feel hurt, yet it's what makes you more beautiful? So that's what I wanted to share about the story of the rock today. And then there's a similar story about this shell. I picked this shell. And the shell I picked because, again, it was beautiful. However, just at the top of this shell, just right at the top, there's that cracks that are showing, and it's kind of a bit crusty at the top. But isn't it those crusts that actually make it even more beautiful? So I can imagine this shell might have been in a lot of different places, and perhaps it might have come in the waves. It didn't have a little creature in it anymore, so perhaps the creature might have had a rough life and be pushed from pillar to post in the waves or against the rocks. And yet I found this shell, and it was shiny, and it had all these lovely grooves and stripy features to it, and yet had this crust on it. It's like the weathered crust. And what is it that might have weathered us that makes us who we are? That's something just to ponder now. So for me, out of this webinar, I'm proposing a kind of a new collective inner wisdom within humanity to consider. And this is within 3 aspects of our inner wisdom. And this you could kind of relate it similar to mind, body, spirit. And in this case, I've put it body, mind, spirit, but effectively we're looking at how do we get and tap into that inner wisdom we have within ourselves. It resides in all of us. Practical wisdom. This is where we rely on kind of like our unique talents. What can we do physically, practically? What are we good at? Whether you're good at swimming, could be sport like cricket, could be running, Pilates, yoga, you name it. What are you good at? So we rely on those abilities, and that's kind of a level of practical wisdom that helps us in our day-to-day life. So whether it's using our kinesthetic skills and abilities, might be using our ears. And for me, I've always loved music. That's an example. And, you know, that might be using my auditory, you know, abilities and be able to listen to the words in a song and it touches my heart. That might help me one day. If I'm not having a good day, I might listen to some music. Helps me feel just that much lighter. So often we're relying on our five senses of, you know, smell, taste, touch, hearing and seeing. With that practical wisdom, we're kind of using our observational skills for our practical wisdom. What are we taking in? What are we not noticing? And that's something really important. What are we not noticing? What do we pick up? What are we observing, like I said before? And, you know, just thinking about what is it that makes you you, and how do you observe or see the world? So then there's that inner mind wisdom. So we're looking at Johari's window. We're looking at the iceberg of consciousness, like I mentioned before. And then there's the collective consciousness. So whether it's within our own inner mind or how we're impacted by others within our mind. We can look to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and that kind of shows us there is that kind of collective human consciousness working in a prismatic way where, you know, information is filtered in and somehow gets kind of spun out in different ways, that our own inner mind is being impacted by white noise. So how can we shut out the white noise to come back to our inner mind? There might be even Facebook groups that help your inner mind, though there are a large majority of things out there within the cyberspace that just might be just white noise and not helpful at all. It's really centering yourself and working out, what is it I'm blind to here? What am I aware of or not aware of? Can you journal about that in terms of how your mind is being impacted by the world around you? Certainly with globalization, many of us are being impacted by cutbacks at work. There's so many different aspects that can then impact on you mentally that you may not have been prepared for. So it's coming back to yourself, centering yourself, you know, having that mindful place to come back to is that inner mind wisdom. And then, of course, I've put this in capitals, it's the collective unconscious as well. So Jung, he was Freud's protege. If you've heard of Jung, he came up with dream analysis and other matters, though he's also best known for some of his spiritual work within therapy. And part of what he came up with, his mother being a psychic, was that there was a collective unconsciousness within humanity. So it's not just the collective consciousness that's different. There's also a collective unconsciousness in that we're all connected unconsciously, whether that's through dreams, symbols, mandalas, can be through so many different ways we're connected unconsciously. It's out of our awareness of how we're connected to others. Things like social media are making it more conscious. So then I see there's almost like that iceberg within humanity at the moment of consciousness, pre-consciousness and unconsciousness in relation to even how we're interacting on a social level across social media. So then there's the esoteric and spiritual wisdom that are kind of without and outside of ourselves, though often the ancient texts teach us so many different things. And one of the things that seems to cross over through most ancient texts, whether it's the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, you know, the Buddhist texts, it doesn't really matter. It's do unto others as you'd have done unto yourself. And that tends to be something that's quite universal amongst religious people and spiritual people alike. And certainly that can be extended out to making sure that we're doing the right thing by the earth, but by ourselves as well as the earth, as well as our fellow humans, as well as our animals on the planet. It's considering all those things, and spiritual wisdom is not just spiritual practice. It's that kind of inner spiritual wisdom that we gain from connecting with others spiritually and then connecting back into self. So how can we all use all these things at work? Certainly that's what I do on a regular basis, and I'm able to, and I'm very, very grateful to be able to use these kinds of things in my work. And it's in such a way that I'm able to use mindfulness with the work I do with my clients, or working on breathing techniques with the clients, or even if it's just tapping into themselves and ensuring that they realize that they have their own inner wisdom. And that's kind of something to work towards for everyone, is what is your inner voice telling you? And kind of working out, what is it that, is it an inner voice talking to you? So we all often have an inner critic, and all of us have that inner critic where we just have this voice that might not say the right things to ourselves. If we quieten ourselves enough though, we might be able to come back to self and actually have a deeper connection to self that then realizes that connection to spirit. And it's in those moments that we can use it while we're working. It's in those moments that help us with our decisions. And so I guess I'm wondering then, how can you use these skills with what you do? And we've got Anita Mojani, and she's here as, I see her as also one of the modern wise people. She's written a brilliant book, and it's Dying to Be Me. And certainly she struggled with cancer herself, and it's the lessons she's learned from that. And she suggests that she doesn't try and push away negative thoughts, because often in modern life we're trying to push away negative thoughts. I've got to be positive. What if it's that if we don't push them away, we acknowledge them, allow yourself to acknowledge them and feel them fully when they crop up, so that then they pass. If we acknowledge now, if you're feeling stressed or feeling anxious or feeling wired or feeling overwhelmed, any of those, feeling angry, any of those thoughts or feelings within your body, mind, your heart, if you're feeling that right now, just take a moment and just center yourself around that. And just acknowledge and breathe into it. It's okay to feel sad, depressed, anxious, devastated. Whatever it is you're feeling, that's okay. And if you aren't, that's great. Come back to this breathing practice, gentle breathing practice, if you find yourself in a rough spot. It's worth coming back to center yourself. So Business Insider, in one of their articles, suggests there's 4 rituals that will make you happier. And it's not just instantaneous happiness. It's, you know, it's real wholehearted happiness. It's asking yourself about the question why. Why is it you do what you do? Even just asking that question can make you think, why am I doing that? Seems silly. How about I try something else? And if we're trying something else after we're asking why, it's then ensuring you have that gratitude as part of your process. Naming the item or situations or feelings or people that you're grateful for. Journal about that. And even naming the sad feelings, looking at, why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling sad? I'm sad because. And we all need feelings, otherwise we'd be robots. So I guess that's what I also wanted to speak to, is we need feelings. They help us be human and connect. So label your negative feelings. How do you feel? Name it. That's number 2 on this list. Importantly though, number 1, I don't want to skim over it. It's making sure we're looking at gratitude as part of our process. Number 3, make that decision. And last night we had a discussion. I had a discussion with Narelle, who was on the line, and she talked about making that decision, and that is something that she is able to do. And some people struggle with that. Whether you're indecisive, that's okay. Even if you make a supposedly wrong decision, it's sometimes better to make a decision rather than none. And number 4, touch people. Hug, kiss and caress people. Have sex if you need it. It's all of that stuff is okay. It's, in fact, it's more than okay. It's we need it for our own survival. Human beings need it. There's a reason why sex is actually meant to be pleasurable for humans, and we actually need it. Freud talked about that too. So we're wired for love and for hugging, for kissing, cuddling, touching. We're wired for that. Even if it's with friends, if you don't have a partner, it doesn't matter. Hugging is really important, and it releases your oxytocin level, and it makes you feel better because it is good for you. So Stan Tatkin, the relationship therapist, suggests that we're wired for love, and really we're designed to be in loving relationships. We can just get ourselves caught up in negative sentiment, and if we come back to love and touch, we feel better. And we need that more now that we're more interconnected on the internet. So keep remembering to bring back hugs with anyone or anyone in your circle that you care about.